So we are ready for our next panel. I have to say, personally, being in this space, there's so much talk of this next topic, and boy, do we have the right people on the stage today. I'm so thrilled. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Joyce Shen from Thomson Reuters. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joyce Shen from Thomson Reuters. I'm the Global Director of Emerging Technologies in our CTO office. We focus across different emerging technology themes, and one of them being distributed ledger and blockchain. So very excited to have this panel here. I think what we do to start off before we talk about smart contract is let you guys introduce yourself and what your firm is focused on.
My name is Marco Santori. I am a partner at Pillsbury Winthrop. I lead the blockchain technology team there. It's a team of 26 lawyers, an interdisciplinary team, each lawyer focusing on a different aspect of blockchain technology, everything from tax and IP, patent and trademarks, to privacy and data security, to regulatory and policy work, which is closest to my heart. And we represent some of the folks here in the space.
I'm Mark Smith. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Symbiont. Symbiont is a smart security company. We've trademarked the term smart securities to focus in on the way we utilize the technology to create financial instruments. And we use the smart securities on distributed ledgers, whether they be public or private or permissioned or non-permissioned or whatever term is the hot term of the day. This is my sixth fintech startup. I've been in the fintech disruptive industry for 20 plus years. So I saw when everything was E, if you'll remember back then in the 90s when everything had an E in front of it, now everything has a blockchain with it. So here we are all over again.
And I'm Preston Byrne with Eris Industries, and we're a smart contracts company. What we do is we have an open source platform that lets people use all kinds of different blockchains. And then what we do is we write smart contracts, and we help people automate legal processes. We're full of lawyers, full of engineers, and full of legal engineers. Small company, but good legal heads. So, yeah.
Who's hot? I'm good.
Got to turn it on. There's a button.
Are you on? Yeah, go green.
Oh, there we go.
Boom. You're up.
Bam. Oh,
Bam,
yeah.
There he is. Now you got him.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, just rehashing, we let people use lots of different blockchains. We write smart contracts. We're all lawyers, and it's pretty punk rock. That's me.
And the marmot.
Oh, yes.
Come on, marmot.
Our logo is a marmot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can tell that this is going to be the most fun panel here. So last year and 2 years ago, people started trying to understand distributed ledger, blockchain, and the smart contract 1.0. This year, we saw so much activity in the industry from your clients, from the industry. What is the definition of smart contracts today, in your view?
You want to go? You want me to go?
Yeah, sure. I mean, because I think we'll each have a little bit different definition.
I agree.
So from our perspective, we look at a smart contract as purely code, which runs on a blockchain. A blockchain gives you state, it gives you some memory. That code allows you to talk to that memory and change that state. That tends to be pretty good if you're keeping track of a financial workflow or a financial process. So we have a very sharp demarcation between sort of the legal piece, which is the prose, and then the code piece, which is designed to automate the prose. So a smart contract, in our view, is the code which matches up with the legal piece.
So our definition is a smart security or smart contract is an event-driven program that executes deterministically. It's native to a distributed ledger. It can take custody of an asset on that ledger and transfer that value from one participant to another on an automated fashion.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Close enough.
And Marco, from a legal perspective, what do you think of those definitions?
I think they're great technological definitions, but a smart contract is not a contract, and that's something that
Agreed. Hurrah.
It's something that it can be a part of a contract. It can be a helpful tool in execution of a contract. It can be a helpful tool in guaranteeing performance of a contract, and some contracts actually can be guaranteed to perform. That's one of the real innovations in this space. And it can also serve a tremendous role, I think, in refining and systematizing the actual terms of a contract, which is something that will, God willing, put a lot of the drudgery in law to rest.
Did we learn with the Dow that the code is not the contract?
Yeah, code's not law.
No,
Get it
Okay,
out
we
of
learned
your
that,
mind.
right? Good. I hope we all learned that lesson.
We
You haven't
haven't
learned
learned
it
that
yet?
yet.
Come
I
on.
disagree. We haven't learned it yet. The courts have yet to speak, and believe me, they will.
So from a legal perspective, from kind of your teams that are building applications that are being orchestrated by a set of smart contracts, right, in the back, how far close are we in kind of thinking about smart contracts with respect to becoming somewhat smart legal contracts? Or you think that gap will always be pretty big, or that demarcation is necessary?
I mean, in my view, the legal contracts will always prevail because those are the ones that humans understand. But when we look at what you want to do with a smart contract, any legal contract you sign will have all of these different parameters and different events and different times at which other people need to communicate with each other. So, there's been an event of default. We need to notify the trustee. The trustee needs to notify the account bank, and they need to change the payment instructions. So all of that is currently done by fax, email, and phone calls. And it costs a lot of money and a lot of lawyers to do it. So the question is, how can we make that process easier, where we say, all right, well, we've got 5 transaction parties. How can we just update the state all at once so that the account bank, the trustee, the bondholders, and everybody else have preset what's supposed to happen, and then it'll just execute without doing all the manual processing. And that's where we think the efficiency gain is. So, I mean, I think you're always going to have legal contracts. And the smart contract, you don't want to put everything in, because there's certain pieces of discretion which you need a human being by definition to exercise. But it's not going to be one of these things where you totally automate it. You will always have little triggers where people step in.
So not as much fun because we're all going to agree. So I think I'm the non-lawyer in the group, or at least the least lawyery in the group. So we agree in that we see these as automation pieces, right? They're what makes the efficiency of these contracts go. They're not the contracts themselves. And it's not mutually, what is it, mutually?
Exclusive?
Exclusive, thank you, Mark. But it's not mutually exclusive to have a contract and have a automation of that contract. So in our smart contract system at Symbiont, we actually have the ability to append a PDF of a contract to the executable code that represents what pieces of it are actually going to become automated. So for example, in catastrophe swaps that we've done in insurance, we actually have the standard contract, and it is a template, and then the user chooses which fields are going to be automated. It actually then, in the written contract itself, makes those fields red. So you can see, here's what's been automated, and then there's all the same legal agreement. That's appended as a PDF. So when I execute that smart contract on the ledger, and it pays out based on a wind catastrophe event that happened in California on the thresholds that had been pre-programmed, if I'm the reinsurer who now is on the other side of that, I can not only see the payments that were made, but I can use my cryptographic identity to click on that and then download the physical contract itself. And if I want to, print it up and say, okay, here's the representation of what just transpired. So it's not that the code is mutually exclusive to the contract. It's that they work together to create massive amounts of efficiency and to try to bring in some objectivity into law, where we can move more away from the gray areas and subjectivity and have some of these things like default happen on a deterministic basis.
So take that scenario and that use case, right? And you may have people in the market and argue and say, well, how is that different from
GitHub?
No, how is that different from applications or companies that are building that are fundamentally based on business logic rules, right? That are also automated. So what are the attributes for the audience here that truly elevate what the application you're building orchestrated by smart contracts versus applications that will be built on existing emerging technologies that also can underpin those applications with fundamental business logic and workflow rules?
We're about, I don't know about you guys, but what we're about is not being a SaaS provider. And what smart contracts allow people to do is not have that SaaS provider in the equation. They can run that on their metal. So let's say you've got a transaction with 5 banks. The banks can run it on their own machinery, which is a prerequisite. And they don't necessarily need to go start up, ABC to go say, well, actually, we need this application. Additionally, a lot of these processes are sufficiently bespoke that you can't really say as a startup, okay, I'm just going to go in and do loans. And that's going to be my thing. Because you go, okay, well, every amendment that you have is going to be a feature request. And then the startup's going to have, going to start there and replicate all of Clifford Chance's, syndicated loan templates? I don't think so. But it could be interesting if you say, what if we go and say, all right, the law firm itself will develop these templates, and they will be able to then, systematize and program these things ahead of time so that they match, and then you can go run it in a virtual machine on Docker, right? You go Dockerize it and go run it at 10 banks. So it'll run no matter what the operating system is. That's something where you can get really specific. You don't need a SaaS provider to do it. People are providing their own infrastructure. And ultimately, if you're a SaaS provider, you run into the same problem that all those silly Bitcoin businesses have, which is they're re-intermediating a system which is designed to disintermediate other people. And so that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, and I think this is where we see the confluence of the distributed ledger and the smart contract kind of take hold. So in this traditional automated fashion, algorithmic companies that are running a lot of rules-based systems, they're doing it in a very centralized fashion, right? And they're receiving their information from external source, they're making their decisions, and they're pushing that information back out as the authority. When you run these deterministically across a distributed ledger, each participant in the network now has some portion of knowledge of the veracity of the chain of custody as it relates to the outcomes of the execution of these contracts, as well as I can interoperate my contract. I can go from doing something with Preston and then immediately do something with Marco without the need to have any kind of additional party participate. I can even automate that function, and I can link contracts together as well. So we have the concept of having one smart contract call another smart contract based on an external event. You can't do that in the traditional programmatic fashion. So you add layers of benefit on this. So I think this is the evolution of the automation functions that you've seen in some of the centralized fashion.
And Marco, does that help lawyers, or does that?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it absolutely does. And what I'm distressed to see out there is that most of this is sustaining innovation. It's the kind of things that just makes existing processes more efficient. And so what you have up on stage here are two exceptions to that rule where they're actually doing something that's really revolutionary. But I think that the distinction that you guys raised between a smart contract simply being sort of a messaging layer that other people agree to take as gospel versus the smart contract being the contract itself, or the digital asset being the asset itself and not just a representation of that asset that a bunch of people get together and by contract agree that they're just going to do whatever the blockchain says. I think that distinction is a very important one, and I think it runs all across every vertical in this space, is that what is this topology going to look like? Is one of the questions that everybody asks. How are we going to have blockchains in the future? Are we going to have a blockchain? How is regulation going to be affected by that? I think ultimately what it comes down to is whether people decide that the blockchain asset is the asset itself, or it's just a representation of that asset. If the blockchain layer is just a messaging system, a signaling system that people use back and forth and agree to take as true, or if that is in fact the real transfer of asset. What happens on the blockchain?
Right. It depends where the docs are. Like if you put your docs on the blockchain, then you can turn and you get your, who is it? Smart Contracts Alliance has just come up with a thing about electronic signatures in the US and getting blockchain signatures across. So if you can get your agreement onto the blockchain, sign it with a private key, and then push a button and press go, what you have is, that's the document, that's the coordination engine, that's as much as you can get.
That's the blockchain utopia, right? That's what we're all the technologists are up here promising and saying, look, instead of having just a bunch of APIs pinging each other, we're going to have a shared database. That's great. That is a tremendous sustaining innovation. But I think what's really revolutionary is that the things that happen on that database, in that database, are actually going to be recognized in law. They're not going to be this superfluous layer that we all look to as truth. That's going to be what's actually recognized in the Uniform Commercial Code. That's actually what is going to be relied upon for policy decisions. It's what's really happening, not the papers being shuffled around underlying them. And that's actually part of what we're doing in Delaware, what Symbiont and I are doing in Delaware, which I don't want to run into if it's a different topic.
I mean, that's the whole key to what we do at Symbiont is our thesis is you have to be as close to the genesis moment of formation of the security itself to maximize the value of the technology and to maximize the legal construct. And so these things need to be native to the ledger. So this whole concept that you've got a token that relies upon some type of cryptographic hash that points to some third-party custodian that then holds the actual asset.
Or runs the code.
It runs the code. Where's the value in that? What are we getting out of that? We've created an extra layer now, really, is what we've done. We've created extra expense. To what end? And we haven't created true property rights. We're still managing the same process where we're probably trading contractual rights instead of property rights. If you can make this native to the ledger, then we really change the whole structure of how the factory floor works in capital markets. So really for us, it's instrument formation before capital formation. You form it on the ledger, you form it as a smart security or smart contract, and then it lives its full life cycle, and then you get the maximum benefit both from a technical perspective and a legal perspective.
So when you talk about building things native on the distributed ledger, that means the kind of big question is about adoption, right? So you're in a distributed network, whether it's in insurance, in finance, in other industries, government, regulatory environment, what have you, in this distributed network, orchestrated by distributed ledgers, orchestrated, underpinned by a set of smart contracts, how do you get these individuals and parties on this distributed network to adopt and to be able to say, yes, I agree with the approach that this has to be built native in order to really realize the value, and that we may or may not have to change and transform the backend architecture of what we have, in addition to building front end so that the business users can actually realize the value that you're articulating.
So
what's the process of doing that?
We're trying to originate the value. So we've decided as a strategy to stay away from secondary market opportunities, which we don't really think are opportunities at all. Right? This rush to solve T+3 in the secondary market for public equity trading is not a technological problem to solve. It is a market structure problem. It's a fiefdom problem. Too much money is made in that structure. Right? There are many. We could have solved that 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago with the existing technology. That's not a technological solution. That's something else. If you can originate these instruments on the ledger, you attract liquidity immediately because that's the only source. That's the only place to get it. So if you look at things like an insurance swap, for example, it's created right there and that's it. It exists, right? A syndicated loan, you originate that syndicated loan to a syndicate. If you do a club deal and you have 20, 30, 40, 50 members of the syndicate, each of them end up having a node on the ledger, on the network, that can grow exponentially, right? So it only takes 10 or 15 deals before you've got a pretty robust ledger operating with several different opportunities to trade these instruments. And then if you look at corporate formation and other things, you have the ability, again, to start at the very beginning. I think that's how you do it. And it's a long game, right? We're talking a decade or more to kind of get to the end game.
Preston, what about
We're a
you're
little
saying?
lower in the stack than you are, so they would be a user or a customer of our tech. And how you do it is actually really easy. So what you do is you get a developer, and you sit them down in front of a computer, and they open their terminal, and they go, Eris services start, and then they go and they pick their blockchain, and they go run it. And that approach has been reasonably successful. I would say more banks use our software than use Bitcoin at this point, and that's, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I think with the private ledger stuff, adoption's been very easy because you go in and you say, okay, guess what? Your KYC AML, not a problem. Guess what else? Your data protection, not an issue. We'll just structure the application to meet it. So yeah, we're more of the pure software side, but
So since you're talking about the stack, and we come back to some of the attributes of smart contracts for the future, but so you need a developer, you spin up the Eris environment. I mean, for a lot of the companies today, right, this year, they're kind of thinking, okay, I got to build a team. I got to do something, tinker with it. What kind of developer they need to hire? What kind of skill they need to have?
Golang engineer, C engineer, I don't know, guy who knows JavaScript. Just you're pick an engineer off the shelf, go drop them who likes the stuff, because then there's all of the community stuff. Blockstack is out there. There are tons of interested people, and they're all sharing ideas. So basically, go within your organization, put a call out, find someone who's interested in it, and then give them 6 months and all the budget they need in terms of their salary to go and. Well, no, seriously, banks are like, oh, where do we start? I don't know. Okay, well, go tell 3 of your people that all of their development cycles for the next 6 months are going to be dedicated towards this, and you can go build whatever you want, and come back in 6 months and let's see what you've got. And by the time they're done, you will have several prototypes in front of you, guaranteed. So that's the kind of approach that you need to take. There's no, how much do I spend? It's take my best people, devote them to to this subject and let them get creative with the business that we run, because I don't know your business, your developers do, your front office guys do, and they're the kind of people who need to be running the software.
We look at it very differently. We say, don't hire any engineers. That's not what you do. You're a bank, be a bank. Don't try to be a tech company. Don't try to figure this out, because at every single cycle of development, pick out a time where those institutions were on the lead for innovation.
1780?
Can't, right? You cannot, right? Even if you could figure it out now to stay on top of it as the cycles change and the technology improves, it's a fool's errand, right? Innovation happens in these kind of startups, in these small companies as they grow, and then they become acquired or they become partners or the institutions become customers of them. We take a different tack. We say, give me your front office guy. We've built a wizard so you don't have to know how this works. You don't have to write one line of code. You can create a smart contract on our platform just by typing in numbers and in fields and hitting a symbol, and that's it. You've got a contract that could be a bond, or it could be a private equity, or an insurance swap, or syndicated loan. So our argument would be, don't try. That you should look to do what you do best, which is onboard customers, create new products, know how to service those customers, custody their cash, manage the AML and KYC, be the regulatory umbrella, and then utilize this technology, enable yourself with this technology. Don't try to build it and keep up with it, because it's just not going to be a successful strategy. Never has been.
And then we're talking about stack, and we're talking about kind of the attributes of smart contracts. So, now it's kind of end of 2016, looking forward to 2017. What's missing in both the technology stack and in kind of understanding the industry from an adoption perspective that is preventing we going to production today? Aside from, scalability, aside from privacy considerations.
Time.
Will. The will to do it, the time to do it. Also payments, right? Let's be honest.
So you think
right?
the technology stack is pretty mature?
There's one piece, right? And that's the cash payment side of the equation.
I think we look at it differently from you in that there may not be a cash payment component in what we're doing. We may be doing something where it's an internal business unit negotiating the terms of something with a client. So, for example, or some work, one application we did for an insurance firm was automating shift allocation and gamifying shift allocation among a claims adjuster workforce. They were telephoning in.
So no need for any payments like that.
But yeah, I think it's just a question of, we know of banks that are moving to production. It just takes time. No one's gonna, for those of you who've heard about the Dow, they wrote the code in 3 months, they published it, and it all imploded catastrophically. So if you're, shock horror. Shock. But if you're, I don't know, if you're BNP Paribas, you're not going to do that. You're going to call up PwC and you're going to penetrate test the living daylights out of it. And then when you're done, then maybe once you're satisfied, you'll say, okay, we'll do a limited pilot with 3 other banks. And that's kind of where we're going, but because we're not rushing it, it's not going to, I'd say early 2017, we see the first ones in production.
I take a different perspective on this, and you're probably all going to be shocked to hear it's a legal one.
No.
Look, what if I told you CEOs of Fortune 500 companies out here in the audience we're just filled with those today, what if I told you that you could put your new issuance of corporate shares on a blockchain? What if I told you it could be born, live, and die, all on a blockchain? You never had to move paper around. What if I told you that? And I said, in fact, the underlying technology is recognized by the law today. It is just a form of uncertificated share. You'd say, wow, that's pretty cool. And the next thing you do is ask your general counsel, is this guy crazy? And your general counsel would say, yes. Your general counsel would say, absolutely, this guy is nuts. How is he a partner at a major global law firm? That makes no sense. And that's one of the major impediments to, I think, full-scale adoption, which is one of your earlier points, is that there's really not a robust legal framework to recognize most of this stuff. There's a contractual framework, like I said. If a bunch of companies want to get together and say, whatever happens on the ledger is gospel and we're going to obey it, great. Contract law permits that. But the Uniform Commercial Code doesn't. The Uniform Commercial Code doesn't say that you can issue a share on a blockchain. And then when control of that share is transfers from one address with a corresponding private key to another address with a corresponding private key, that settlement finality has occurred. It doesn't say that. It says that, in fact, for corporate shares, settlement finality has to proceed via custodians. Custodians. That's exactly what we're trying to streamline today. We're trying to streamline that whole process. We're trying to avoid the custodian lily hopping. There's just no, like we said, there's no technological reason that it needs to happen now, but there is a major reason why it needs to happen now. And that's the law. The law does not accommodate this stuff yet. It does not accommodate it to an extent that when the CEO turns to a general counsel and says, hey, can we do this? The general counsel says, well, it sounds like a great idea. That's not the way things are now. So I mentioned Delaware before. Part of what we're doing in Delaware is, well, it's called the Delaware Blockchain Initiative. The state of Delaware, which is a juggernaut in the world of incorporation, has agreed to work with the blockchain technology industry. It's a very business-forward state. And the governor has asked the Corporation Council, the Delaware Bar Association, to propose new amendments to the Delaware General Corporation Law.
I can't believe you guys pulled that off. It's so annoying.
I love it.
And Symbiont and I are working together on this, as you can probably tell. So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, wait, really? They're literally changing the law on this point? That can't be right. No, it is. That's exactly what we're doing. It's that big of a deal. It's difficult to overstate. This is the most important thing happening certainly in blockchain technology right now, speaking as someone who's been in this industry for, well, not since the beginning, but pretty early on. And I dare say in the world of corporate law. I truly think this is the most important thing happening here. This is the fundamental change that will make way for all of this that we're talking about in the context, in the context of corporations, in the context of capital markets, in the primary markets certainly, in terms of primary issuances, and it lays the groundwork for secondary market trading as well. So it's a real big deal.
And do you think the precedent that you're setting or in the process of setting Delaware would help kind of the broader ecosystem to think about innovation? Typically it's innovation. Regulation follows innovation, right? That's what they say. So in this case, we really need, the regulators and government to kind of embrace this for real meaningful adoption beyond, kind of even production in pockets, right? And so
yeah, I mean, look, this is what we do. This is what we do at Pillsbury, right? This is the tip of the spear. This is the policy work that's getting the laws. That's getting the laws to accommodate what's really going on in business. It's making sure our clients' voices get heard, and without being too pluggy. I mean, that is the job that we're doing in Delaware.
do you think the regulators are getting what? I mean, I think there are still lots of education has to be done across industry at every level of the organization. I mean, do the regulators get it? Like, what is blockchain? What's distributed ledger? What's smart contracts? How they work together?
They get it, but the problem is they've heard so much bullshit over the course of the last 3 years that they were very confused. So they hear things like Bitcoin's a protocol, and it's like magic money, and all this other really good proof of work, proof of stake. And then, of course, we go in and they go, what is this stuff? And we go, it's a file type.
On a distributed database.
It's a distributed database with that batches transactions and that you sign things with public keys or private keys. And then they're like, oh, why didn't anyone say that before? I was like, I don't know. Where
Bad branding.
So yeah, I think they were really confused. But when you go in and put it in terms they can understand, the confusion evaporates fairly quickly. And then they look and they go, okay, cool, this is a multilateral reconciliation engine. What can we use it for? And then proceed from there.
Yeah. For what we do, and actually for my whole career, the opportunities come when there's a confluence of a technological shift, a change in the structure of capital markets, and if you can get a regulatory tailwind, that's when everything really goes. So who remembers here in the mid-90s when we made the move from open outcry and OTC market making to the first matching engines? Who remembers that?
I was 10.
Right? Shut up. Shut up, Preston. I was not. So the regulatory tailwind there was the order handling rules. When the OTC market makers abused their privilege and they maintained spreads and they were keeping their clients' orders, limit orders off the book so they wouldn't interrupt their quarter spread in Dell, right? And they were colluding with one another and being very brazen about it. And the SEC came in and said, okay, you're going to stop that. And how do they solve it? They solved it with technology. And what was the technology? It was a matching engine. It started off with Instinet as an agency broker, and then it was the creation of the ECNs, right? So I was a partner in the 7th ECN approved by the SEC, and that, at first, was very much like blockchain. Everybody said, whoa, matching engines, this is the greatest thing ever. This is going to change the world. Well, it didn't take long, probably 12 or 18 months, before everybody realized, okay, what is that? That's just an electronic way to match buyers and sellers. What do we do with that? And then the true value came with the workflow and automation that happened on top. So we had algorithmic trading, we had sophisticated order types, time slicing, order aggregation, multiple data points. All these things happened, and that's what compressed spreads, and that's what shot volumes to the moon, right? And so if you think about that context, and now you apply it to what we're doing today, the distributed ledger is the matching engine, right? Everybody now agrees it's cool. Everybody now, I think we have Harmony now. That's a great database. It's a great way to store information. It provides a lot of interesting fail-safes and protections and all this great stuff, and we share information in state, and there's no more reconciliation. Hallelujah. But what's that really going to do for me? It's going to provide a base foundation to create automation and new workflows. And the automation and new workflows really will be driven. The catalyst will be the changes in regulation. And as we have this regulatory tailwind, and as we change the 33 and 34 Act around the definition of settlement, finality, and how that's done, and as different states change the way they deal with uncertificated ownership of corporations, and as we can move through the process and automate these functions, then you're going to see massive adoption in these use cases because there's a level of certainty through the regulation, and then there's a baseline of technology to adapt it, and there's going to be many winners, right? You would have thought that when matching came out, there should have been one central exchange that matched every single order, right? Because that would be the most efficient way, because we have best execution, right? National best bidder offer. What do we have now? 60 plus marketplaces of all different flavors and types to send orders to. When the New York Stock Exchange went down and its technology went down last year, did anybody even see a bump in the road? No, it was accidentally decentralized. The exchanges have been accidentally decentralized by all these marketplaces, and you can see the result. It was just a smooth market when that happened. So I think you're going to see the same thing here, and it's taken a long time. Those order handling rules were passed in 1997. We're in 2016 now, and we're still not 100% electronified in the trading side of the house. So we're going to have a decade of building this foundation and regulators getting their hands around this, and we're going to have some really kind of bad rules that are prescriptive, as I've learned from my counsel, and we're going to have some good rules that are descriptive, that sort of put some boundaries out and say, work within this context and let's see where the innovation will take us. And that's what's really exciting. And then you can start to envision the world of interconnectivity where you have the oracleization of sensors, right? So you have all these sensors that are out in the Internet of Things, and they're providing data points, and that data point are being fed into a distributed ledger. And when that hits the distributed ledger, these smart contracts are looking for this information, and it's an event that triggers the program to execute, whether it be internally as an intra-ledger, whether it be externally as a payment, whether it just be your refrigerator buying groceries for you at the store. All these things become possible over that kind of time frame.
Imagine if you wanted to build the climate corporation today with that.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Amazing.
So I think we just gave Lewis 2 more panels for the next one. When would the regulators get it? And then I think we can devote another entire hour talking about machine-to-machine, distributed network, and distributed ledger and IoT. So why don't we open up for questions? Gentleman over there. Oh.
Pass the mic. Pass the mic.
Hi. Quick question for Marco. So you mentioned about Delaware and forming corporation on the blockchain, and that essentially new legislation has to be passed. Do you have any number one? Do you have any estimate of when they would actually pass a law to enable this? And number 2, can I form the first one?
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you asking that. So we are about, we are less than a year away from the initial regulations becoming effective. Less than a year. When you think in policy timelines, you're thinking, yeah, well, maybe my grandkids will see the benefits of this. No, really, we are a year away. Delaware is, if you're looking at all the states, you think, well, why Delaware? It's a tiny state of 1 million people, less than 1 million people. Well, it's very business forward, but that's not just sort of a cultural thing. It's actually enshrined in statute. Every year, the Delaware General Corporation Law is reviewed by the Corporation Council, and the Corporation Council suggests new amendments every year. The law changes every single year, and those are taken up in January. They will they then become effective beginning of the summer. So by this time next year, if all goes well, it's by no means guaranteed, but if all goes well, by this time next year, we will have some instantiation given to the governor's request to amend the corporation law to actually take advantage of this stuff. It's not in my hands, it's not in Symbiont's hands, it's in the hands of the Corporation Council and the legislature ultimately. But we were honored to submit the first draft for consideration and discussion of those amendments.
And the good news is this really is more of a clarification around Title VIII of the UCC for uncertification that the state of Delaware already embraces. It's already part of the code. So it's really defining what is a share registry and what does it look like if you're uncertificated in this fashion. So it's, I wouldn't call it fiat, but it doesn't take an act of the legislation to put forth a whole new proposal. It's really clarifying a section that already exists.
Yeah, and so remember,
which is helpful.
I said, what if I told you that you could already do this under existing law? Actually, it's not crazy. I mean, no general counsel of a Fortune 500 company is going to advise their CEO to do this right now because the laws aren't there. But conceptually, blockchain-based shares are an uncertificated share, and so what Delaware tries to do is be descriptive, to clarify the existing law as to how it applies to what's actually happening in the market. And that's the process that we hope to achieve here.
Over there.
Hi, I'm Bridget Marsh. I'm with the LSTA, the Loan Syndications and Trading Association. Any of the panelists, feel free to answer this. You said that a smart contract is not a contract. I'd be curious, are there things that, say, we at the LSTA can start to do to our forms, which are used both in the primary and in the secondary, to adapt them so that they can be coded and are more amenable to becoming a smart contract?
Hi, Bridget. So thanks for asking. We are proud members of the LSTA at Symbiont. We also have a joint venture with iPrio, if those of you who know iPrio is, specifically in syndicated loans. We're just about to launch with a group of 7 banks and 5 of the top 10 on the league tables on the buy side for syndicated loans. We're actually modeling ourselves all your template contracts. So we already have a traditional revolver and a par contract already modeled as a Symbiont smart loan. We make sure we don't call them securities because from a regulatory perspective, these are loans. We're very careful about that. So yes, so the answer is yes, and we would love to help. And I think Preston would love to help as well. I mean, they are the ultimate in template builders for these things. But yeah, we think it's value. Pillsbury's our counsel, yep. But yeah, so we're as members, we've gone and taken those and modeled them ourselves and have done a lot of experiments and proof of concepts already with your forms.
So if you want to retain the IP, what you can do is you can use our software to write your own. As opposed to using his. So it depends on your approach. Basically, it's an interest rate is not hard to write in code as against calendar dates and everything else, and all this stuff is very standardized anyway. So yeah, ours is just a platform which your developers could certainly experiment on and take a look at building your own templates. If that were something you wanted to do, or in the alternative, for they have a different approach as well. So it just depends on what really you're trying to achieve. So.
And I also would have thought that sort of the tokenization that corresponds to identity would be helpful in the diligencing that the financial institutions are doing for the KYC, et cetera. I mean, that would seem to really amenable to this type of technology.
Yep.
Yeah, the hard part with identity in that fashion is who is that party that's going to attest to the veracity of the underlying documentation that creates that identity in the first place. I think that's it. Like we are hopeful that a body or a group We thought that would be a great first use case for R3, for example, because all those institutions could create a utility and really maximize the value and pass it along. But other external companies that already do identity, I think potentially could step into the space. There's a lot of new startups trying to get in there. We hope that happens because we think it is a fantastic plug-in for what we're trying to accomplish. We just don't want to do it
I think
ourselves.
there's a question here and the question in the back. Oh, the time's up.
Yeah, in order to keep things going, but you guys will be around for lunch as well in 45 minutes, so ask the difficult questions in private. Make them look bad on stage. No, so up next, we're actually a round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
And thanks again, Joyce, for moderating.